by unlocking the secrets of black and white fine art editing, I have revolutionized my approach to photography. This transformative technique goes way beyond mere desaturation. Through careful adjustments in exposure, brightness and contrast, you can enhance your image's depth and dimension. So please follow along with me so you can also achieve that fine art look in your images.
Now this is the image we'll be editing. I took this image last year in Iceland and we'll be turning it from color to black and white and then into fine art. The first thing I always do is change the color profile to Adobe Landscape. As you can see, the colors came more bright. I'm going to leave them like that. And the next thing I do is I'm going to play around with the exposure tabs. First thing I do is reduce the highlights. We get some more detail in the sky here. This image I exposed to the right. Next, I'm going to slightly increase the shadows, not too much. Increase the whites and check for any clippings by holding down the Alt key and turning up the slider. When you see the brightness, the whites coming, just dial it down a bit more. And always check your histogram for clippings on the highlights or the blacks. I'm going to do the same to the blacks. This time I'm going to dial it down until I see blacks and dial it up a bit more. Okay, I'm going to slightly increase the contrast. Around 30, and now I'm going to reduce the exposure. Check your histogram, it's pushed to the right and we want it somewhere even in the middle. Watch your histogram as you dial it down, and it should be somewhere like that. Now you can see the colors are over exaggerated, saturated, and that's how I'm going to leave them. I'm just going to increase them a bit more by going down to the blue primary on the calibration tool and increase halfway to around 50. As you notice, I do not touch the color tab, the vibrance or saturation, because we want to over exaggerate the colors and vibrance. I'm not going to reduce or increase since we use the calibration tool down here. Next thing I'm going to do is go down to the effects tab, slightly increase the texture, a bit of clarity, not too much, and increase the dehaze. You can see we have much more detail in the sky. I'm going to dial it down a bit to around 30. Check the exposure panel. I'm going to increase slightly the shadows. We still have dark here. Somewhere like that. Okay. Next, from here, we're going to jump over to Photoshop. Now we're in Photoshop. Do not shy away from Photoshop. These steps I'm showing you are very easy steps. Simple. Anyone can do them. The next thing I do, we're going to turn it to black and white. Go down to the adjustments panel down here. On the adjustment layer, this small circle that's half black, half white, and click on the black and white. There, it's changed it to black and white. You can play around with these sliders if you want. You can see like up and down, it affects only the color. That's why I increase, over exaggerate the saturation and colors, so I get more detail, exposure in the color that I need. I'm gonna try and use the auto to see what happens. It's okay, I like it. I'm gonna keep it like that. So that's done. We changed it from color to black and white. And that's the first step of fine art. Now the next step I do is I go down to the gradient map. It's down here. Click on the drop down window and press classic. Now if yours is like this, all you have to do is click on the gradient map here, because the black should be here and the white should be on the right side. Click on it and just swap them here. Just turn them around, that's all. And there we have it. I'm gonna click OK. Gonna close this window. It came very contrasty and dark. If you don't like it, just go up to the opacity here and reduce the slider until you find your setting. I'm going to leave it around 55. Next, I'm going to flatten the image. And then I'm going to take it back over to Adobe Camera Raw. I forgot to mention that I'm using Adobe Camera Raw. If you're using Lightroom, it's just the same. I find Adobe Camera Raw much easier to use. And they have all the same sliders and settings and everything. Next, from here, I'm going to start with the masking. And here we'll be turning it into fine art. Here I've, like I said in the thumbnail and the title, I've cracked the code or unlocked the secrets to fine art in my kind of way. First, I start with a linear gradient. For the sky, I go down around halfway and reduce the exposure. Somewhere there. Next, I do another linear gradient on top of the first linear gradient I done. But not go down so much, just to the top part. I reduce the exposure again. I'm going to go down a bit more further. I'm going to reduce slightly the highlights. That seems fine. Okay. Next, I'm going to use another linear gradient, but now for the foreground. And another tip, if you hold down the up arrow, your linear gradient will move in a straight line. I'm going to put it somewhere around there. Going to reduce the exposure here. Not too much. Around there. Okay. I'm going to use the radial tool. Radial gradient, I mean. And I'm going to put it over on the brightest part of the image. It's over here. Another tip, you have to draw the viewer's eye into the image, starting from the bottom and leading up to the brightest part. The viewer always sees the brightest part. It draws the eye to the brightest part. Here I'm going to increase slightly the exposure. I reduce the highlights. We get much more detail in the sky here. Okay. I'm going to open it up a bit more. Close it from the top. That's it. Now I'm going to use another radial gradient on the same spot as the first one and make it a bit larger though. And here I'm going to invert the gradient and I'm going to reduce the exposure. Seems okay. Next, I'm going to increase the exposure on these parts here. On the top parts and somewhere around here as well on the grasses. I'm going to be using a radial gradient for that. I'm going to first put it over here. My feathering is up to 100. Seems okay. I'm going to use another radial gradient for here. Increase the exposure. Another it's my dog barking. I just close the door. I'm going to use another radial gradient for here. And slightly increase the exposure as well. Make it a bit larger. Okay. I'm going to go out of the masking, step back a bit and check your image. It seems okay. I'm just going to use the brush tool now. And I'm going to just mask slightly around the mountain here and on the grasses here. And here I'm going to apply some sharpening. If you go overboard here, I've just gone over that. You can just use the subtraction tool and you can remove it. I think I've done here as well. Should be okay. And next, I'm going to sharpen the mask. Around 50. Should be okay. 45, so something like that. Okay. Next, I'm going to apply, I think, another radio. But now for the whole image. I'm going to invert it again. I prefer using the radio gradient for vignetting because you can apply it how you want and where you want, and reduce the exposure a bit more. Okay, now we're ready from Adobe Camera Raw. The last part, I take it back over to Photoshop, click OK. You can see the image change. Oop, there we are. And for the last part, I'm gonna use the curves tool. I don't play around with this much. What I prefer to do is go down to the presets, the default, and I click on the linear contrast. And it's given me a much more contrasty and brighter image. If you want to go back to adjust it, just click on here. In fact, I'm going to decrease the blacks. And I think I'll slightly increase the whites, the highlights. You can check it by clicking this eyeball here for before and after. I'm going to flatten the image. And there we have our final image. Make sure to check the final image at the end of the video. I've already done a final image. This is just showing you the editing. And thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. And make sure to watch my other videos on editing, black and white, and even color images. Thank you once again. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you. See you guys. Bye.